It will going to hold or it will going to have a collection of similar kinds of elements, and we are going to call or we are going to represent that set of elements with the same name. First, I have to specify the name of an array, then I have to specify the location. That location starts with an index called 0. So with the help of that location, I can fetch or I can access the content which is resides in the location. I have more dimensions, more than 2 dimensions for a particular set of item of the same data type under a single name. Hello everybody, welcome to the first session on new chapter of your first PUC's Computer Science, that is what chapter 11 arrays. I am Rohini TS from the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Mysuru. So if you learn this chapter, so if you studied all the concepts, that is mainly important concept of this chapter, totally you are going to get 9 marks. So this is regarding the blueprint of this chapter. So the chapter number 11 arrays. So in this you are going to get 1 mark 1 question. So 1 mark 1 question will be there and 3 mark 1 question, as well as we are going to get 1 question from the 5 marks. Totally you are going to get 3 questions in the 1 mark, 3 mark as well as the 5 mark, and it will be totally for 9 marks. Then what are the content of this chapter? So what and all we are going to learn in this chapter? So when it comes to the arrays, that is chapter 11. So in this today's session, we are going to learn about the introduction. So what do you mean by arrays and what is the need of having this arrays concept in the computers or in the programming? Then how we are going to get to know what are the fundamentals of an array. So if I need to consider an array, what are the fundamental or what are the basic rules are we supposed to follow? How we are going to write the problem or how we are going to use this array concept in the programming? Everything that I am going to discuss under the fundamentals of an array. Also, I will be discussing regarding the types of an array, and we are going to learn each type individually in the coming session. So let me get into the today's session, that is what related to arrays. So before getting into this arrays concept in the computer languages and all, so you just recall. So in our daily life, we are going to make some of the grouping. So we are going to have a list of students, we are going to have list of books in the library, and we may contain list of sarees in the cupboard. That is what everything is what list. That is what it is just a combination or it is just a collection of something which will going to have a similar kind of data. So if you consider a library and all, so in particular rack they are going to keep similar kinds of books. That is what they are making a group of similar kinds of data. So in our daily life, that will be the thing which will going to happen. So in the programming also, if I wanted to make a group of similar data, so if I wanted to make a group of similar kinds of data type, then we are going to use this array concept. So array is nothing but it is a collection of homogeneous elements. Homogeneous in the sense, it is a collection of same kinds of elements. So if I am taking a list of students who have scored more than 90, all have scored more than 90, that means what, they are satisfying the given condition and those students are belong to the same category, then I can call those number of students as a single array. So array is nothing but it will going to hold or it will going to have a collection of similar kinds of elements, and we are going to call or we are going to represent that set of elements with the same name. That is what represented as a array. So we'll see now, when I wanted to group similar kinds of elements, it can be tens or thousand, like billion, anything it could be. If I wanted to store or if we wanted to hold similar kind of data type or if you wanted to hold similar kinds of data and information, then we are going to use this array concept. So in the computer language, we also need, in order to group together the data items of the same types, when we are linking all the different kinds of sub-program as a single program, then linking is important. So what we are linking here, we are grouping or we are making a combination of a similar kinds of data items together. So for that concepts, we are going to use this array. So that grouping may include any number of data items. It can be tens or thousand. It can be of any numbers. Array can have n number of data elements, but it must be of same type. And the data items grouped in an array can be simple type. So which kind of data type we are going to use? So you have to consider one thing. I'm grouping similar kind of data. So I'm grouping similar kind of data. That means we have to group a similar kind of items of a same data type. That may include integer, float, character, double, anything. So already we have learned regarding the data types. So when I'm wanting or when I just wanted to group a similar kind of data type, then we have to assume that we are grouping a same kind of elements which belongs to the same data type. So if I'm taking 10, 20, 30, so what is this? These are all the whole numbers. If I wanted to take 10, 20, 30 in my program as a elements of an array, all these must belong to the same data type. So I can call that as a int data type or an integer data type. And let me take one more example. Here I have 10 and I have A, B and 2.6. What is this? Is all these elements is of same type? No. 10 is what? This is whole number and A and B are the character and this 2.6 is the floating point numbers. I cannot group together. Why? Because all these data elements are different data type. Only this array concept is possible only when the data items belongs to the same data type. Then only we can use this array concepts. If I wanted to store similar kind of data item of the same data type, then we are going to use this array concept. So, as we all know that in our daily life, we will come across with this arrays concept. It consists of list of employees in an organization, list of students in a classroom and list of books in a library. Okay. So, list of products in a shop. So, this is what we are going to make that as a categories. We are going to group them as a similar kind of data item based on its characteristics or based on the operation that it will going to perform. So now we'll see what you mean by an array, and this definition of an array is also important for 1 mark question. Define an array. Then what is array? So array is a collection of elements. Array is a collection of elements. Then how the element must be? All the elements are of the same data type under the single name. Very, very important. We are going to group number of elements. Which kind of elements we are grouping? We are grouping same kind of or same data type element, and if I have 10 number of elements, I am going to call all the 10 elements with the same name. If I have 100 number of elements of a same data type, then also we are going to call that 100 number of elements as a single name. So that is what array is all about. Array is nothing but it is a collection of homogeneous elements. Homogeneous in the sense same kind of element. Then in terms of what? It must be the same data type. So array is collection of elements where all the data item are of the same data type under the single name. Then we are going to call that as an array. If I have 100 of elements, then how can I get to know which is the 5th element, which is the 9th element, which is the 100 element? So there must be some numbers, no? For array elements, then we are going to give the values, or we are going to give address of each element. That numbers will going to be starts with 0 up to n minus 1. So the elements are numbered as 0, 1, 2 up to n minus 1. So why I am taking this as n minus 1? Let me consider one thing. You just consider I have 5 elements in an array. Okay. So if I wanted to identify what is the array, then what is the name? If I wanted to identify any people, then I have to call them with their name. So that name is what? That indicates who is that person, right? In the same way here, if I wanted to identify what is the program we are performing or what is the operation that is performing, I have to give some name for the array. So consider name of an array is A. What is the name I am giving to the array? That is A. And then how many elements it has? It has 5 elements. Okay. So let me take the elements, that is what? 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. How many elements I have? I have 5 elements and it starts with 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. Then how can I get to know which is the second element, which is the first element, or which is the last element? So now you can just assume that these are all the elements of an array of a name called A. So here we have only minimum number, that is what we have 5 elements. So if I ask you which is the second element of this array, then directly you are going to say 20, right? But what if I have thousands of elements? What if I have n number of elements? Then it is mandatory to give the address to the elements of an array. So that address or the location will going to be starts with a number called 0. Then how can I give the value or how can I give the address to the particular elements of an array? First, I have to specify the name of an array. Then I have to specify the location. That location starts with an index called 0. So here how we are supposed to do? Array name is A and index, the value will going to be starts with 0. And here A of 1 and here A of 2 and here A of 3 and this is A of 4. So you can observe one thing, the elements will going to be numbered as 0, 1, 2 up to n minus 1. n minus 1. Why it is specifying n minus 1? So if I consider this as n is nothing but number of elements in an array. Then n minus 1. What is the last index? 4. So 5 minus 1 is obviously it is 4. That is what it is representing, because we are going to get one lesser number than the number of elements. Why? Because we are going to give the address which starts with 0. So if you are giving the address by 1, then it will be n. We are giving the address by 0 and it is mandatory to give the address of an array which must be starts with 0 itself. At last it will be n minus 1. Okay, now what we got to know, that definition of an array and how the addressing we are going to give for each elements of an array. Then these numbers are called indices or subscript. Very, very important. What do you mean by indices or a subscript? That specify the location of an element in an array. So if I consider this as the 5 elements of an array, 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. What is the address of second element? At that time, second element is 20. What is the address? A of 1. So, this A of 1 is nothing but subscript or a indices. Here you can see that these numbers are used to locate the position of the elements within the array. So by making use of this indices or a subscript, we will get to know what is the position or what is the location of an element in an array. Okay. So let me write for you how we are going to write the array. Here, consider my array name is A. And it has 5 elements. I am going to fill the values 10, 20, 30, 40. At last I have 50. Then how can I give the addresses for each element? Then it has to start with an index called 0. So that A of 0 and here it will be A of 1, here A of 2, A of 3 and A of 4. What is the location of an element called 50? So, the location of an element called 50 is A of 4. And what is there in A of 2? 2, that is what? 30. Okay. So, these numbers or the position which like the subscript will going to returns the position or a location of an element in an array. So, in the 5 elements, what is the location of this element called 20? Then what is the location of an element called 50? How can I get to know that? With the help of this indices or a subscript. And we have to give a numbers within the square bracket. So we have to give a number within the square bracket and it must be a whole number. I cannot give the address as 1.5 or I cannot give the address as 2.5, something like that. I cannot give any floating point values to these addresses. It must be a whole number. If it is a whole number, then which kind of data type I am supposed to take for indices or a subscript? It is always integer or a int. Very, very important question for 1 mark. What is the data type What is the data type of indices or a subscript? It must be always integer or int. Subscript is represents the location of an element in an array. So I cannot give 1.5, 2.8. We can't give any floating point values. We have to give only whole numbers for the addresses. It must starts with 0 up to n minus 1. So if I have 100 elements, then if the value of n is 100, then the last location will be 99 because it will going to start the location from 0. That is what you have to understand. Okay. So these are all the basic things about the what you mean by array and how the elements will going to be organized and how we are going to fetch the element by the addresses. That addresses will be termed as what? Location or a position of an element in an array with the help of this indices or a subscript. Here you can see that we have taken one example, right? I have 5 elements and array's index starts with 0. Then if I consider this as an A, array name is A, then we have to write this indices with along with the name of an array. So A of 2. So that indices or a subscript must be enclosed between the square brackets. So you should not use any parenthesis or you should not use any of the flat braces and all. It's supposed to be a square brackets. Very, very important. So A of 3. At last we have A of 4. Okay, so we'll see here A is the name of an array and the elements can include or the elements can be directly accessed. If I wanted to access the 30, how can I access? I know the location of that 30, that is what A of 2. So with the help of that location, I can fetch or I can access the content which is resides in the location. How can we reach out to anyone of house or home? So by their address. So if I know the address properly, then I can access their house. That is what the reason we are going to give an address or a location for each element in an array. So here A of 0 is the name of the first element which is present at the position 0. Then this 10 is the first element of an array. We have 5 elements and the location of a first element is A of 0. A is the name of an array and 0 is the location or a position of the first element. Then what is the location of last element? That is always n minus 1. Location of a last element in an array is n minus 1. N represents the number of elements. If it is n minus 1, then it will be 4. Number of elements are 5 and the location of last element will be n minus 1. So 5 minus 1 become 4. So A of 4 is the location of last element. Then what we are going to call this process as? We are giving some indices, we are giving some subscript, I'm giving some position to the particular element of an array. Then what is this position or what is this process is termed as? We'll see now the method of numbering the ith element. Ith element in the sense that starts with 0 itself. The index, I index, that is what ith element represent index element. It has to start with an index called 0 itself. Okay, so the method of numbering, we are giving the number, I'm starting with 0 up to n minus 1. The method of numbering the ith element with index I minus 1 will be called as 0 based indexing. So we are going to start the index with 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to n minus 1. What is the total number of elements of an array? Will going to be minus 1. That will be the index of a last element of an array. That will returns the position or a location of a last element of an array. So that process of numbering the ith elements with the help of this index I minus 1 will going to be termed as what? 0 based indexing. Okay, so this is regarding what do you mean by array? How can we give the name to an array and what kind of elements will be stored and what is the value or a position of each element in an array. Okay, let me take one more example. So which kind of data item it is, whether it is a whole number or a character. It is float that consists of both whole number as well as the fractional part. That kind of data elements, we are grouping similar kind, but it is of floating point integer. Let me consider the name of an array as m. Then what is the address of first element here? That is represented by m of 0 and m of 1 and m of 2. Understand one thing, what is the total number of elements? That is 3. What is the first element location? Here the location of a first element is 0. The location of last element is n minus 1. N is 3. 3 minus 1 is 2. The location of a last element is 2 here. Okay, that represent that indexing, giving the numerals or a numbers to each location of an array elements will going to be termed as zero indexing or zero based indexing. Okay, so then what are the types of arrays we have? So already I have discussed regarding what? Fundamentals of an array. So we got to know that what do you mean by array and how the elements will going to be stored and how can I access the elements, what do you mean by numbering or what is subscript or what must be the data type of a subscript. Everything I have discussed. Then what are the types of arrays we have? We have 3 kinds of arrays. One is one-dimensional array and two-dimensional array. And is it 3-dimensional? More than 2 dimension will be termed as what? Multi-dimensional array. So we have 3 kinds of array, 1-dimensional, 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional. Okay. So we'll see one by one right now. First is what? 1-dimensional array. So this is just a brief introduction about each type of an array. So in the coming session, we are going to learn the deep discussion regarding each type of an array. Okay. We'll see what do you mean by one-dimensional array in short. So as we all know that array will going to hold the same kind of data elements, right? It will going to hold n number of data elements which is of a same data type. Under the single name, if I have 100 number of elements, then I am going to call or we are going to identify that 100 number of elements with a single name. You consider one real-time example. So there will be a class, right? So if I wanted to consider any of the students, let me consider class 2nd year computer science students. So if I just wanted to identify any of the student who belongs to that class, so we are going to call that student as an element of a particular array. Okay. So if there is 70 students in an array or if there is 70 students in a class, then each student will going to be termed as what? Elements. And how we are going to give the numbering? So it will start with 0. You consider it will start with 0. If there is total number of 70 students, then last index or a last address of the last element is what? 69. So that is what? We are going to give the numbering as per the 0th index. That is what? It will be termed as what? Zero based indexing. So we are grouping and we are calling all the students with a single name. That is what? Second PUC computer science or a first PUC computer science. So instead of giving name for each element, we are making a group of similar kinds of element together and I am giving one name to everybody. So all the elements belong to the same array with the same name. So that is regarding array. Then what do you mean by array or what do you mean by one-dimensional array? That is also in short will be termed as 1D. 1D is nothing but one-dimensional array. So it is an array in which each element is accessed by using only one subscript. How many subscript will going to be present in one-dimensional array? Only one subscript. Then what is the use of subscript or indices? That will going to returns the position of an element in an array, right? So we have learned regarding the subscript that will going to returns the position or a location of an element in an array. So if an array having only one subscript or if I am accessing the elements of an array by making use of only one subscript, then that kind of array will going to be termed as what? One-dimensional array. This is also an array. It will going to hold the similar type of data elements under the same name, but the elements of an array can be accessed with a single subscript. That is regarding what? One-dimensional array. The only one subscript represents the position of the elements in an array. So if I am going to use A of 0, What it represents? This represents the location of a first element, right? It represents the location of a first element. If I am going to represent A of 5, it represents the location of a sixth element, right? Because don't get confused, A of 5 is sixth element, A of 0 is first element. It will be in the +1 format. Okay, so A of 0 will going to return the address of first element. In the similar way, A of 1 second element, A of 2 third element, A of 3 fourth element, A of 4 fifth element, and A of 5 sixth element. It will goes on like that up to n minus 1. So that is number of elements will going to be -1 because index starts with 0. How many subscribed I am using? How many indices I am using here? I am using only one index. So if an array having only one index, in order to represent the location of an element in an array, then that will going to be termed as what? One-dimensional array. So then you can just imagine what will be regarding this two-dimensional array. Instead of having one dimension or instead of having only one subscript, here we will be having two subscript. That is regarding what? Two-dimensional array. So we'll see in two-dimensional array, in short we are going to call this as a 2D. Okay, so 2D array or two-dimensional array. So we'll see the definition of this two-dimensional array. It is an array in which each element is accessed. I'm fetching where it is in the exactly what is the location of an element in an array with the help of or using two subscript or two indices. So that will going to be termed as what? Two-dimensional array. I have an array and I have a group of elements. Instead of having only one subscript, I am accessing the content or I am accessing the elements of an array with a two subscript. That will going to be termed as what? Two-dimensional array or a 2D array. So here subscript also represents the location of an element in an array. So you can consider I am going to use 0, 0. Okay, so in the coming session, I will let you know what is this first subscript indicates and what is this second subscript will going to indicates. But instead of having only one subscript, we will be having two subscript. That is also going to represent the location of an element in an array. Okay, this is regarding what? Two-dimensional array. Then what do you mean by multi-dimensional array? Am I going to write A of 0, A of 0, 0, 0 like that? No, that is what we are representing the location where it is exactly in the array. So we are finding the location of an element or we are accessing the elements of an array in the particular set of array elements. Then what is this multi-dimensional? The element or an array which is greater than the two dimension will going to be termed as what? Multi-dimensional array. One dimension, two dimension and greater than two dimension. Like it can be 3, 4, any number of dimension it would be. Then that kind of array will going to be termed as what? Multi-dimensional array. So we'll see the definition. A multi-dimensional array is an array of n dimensions. So if I am going to give the value of n as 5, then it is of 5 dimension. That kind of array will going to be termed as what? 5-dimension array or multi-dimensional array. So usually we are going to term 1 and 2 dimension. Other than anything, it will be termed as what? Multi-dimensional array. So an array of n dimensions. So that will be a collection of n number of dimensions. So that is will be termed as what? Multi-dimensional array. So how can I define this multi-dimensional array? An array of array is called multi-dimensional array. So if I consider an array, so it will be a what? Collection of some elements. Array of array. That is what? Collection of arrays. Collection of arrays. Then it will going to be considered as a single array. That is what? Array of arrays. So that is also termed as what? Multi-dimensional array. I have more dimensions, more than 2 dimensions for a particular set of item of the same data type under a single name. That is also termed as what? Multi-dimensional array. So if I am going to hold what 2-dimensional array then that will going to be considered. If I am having n number of two-dimensional array, then that is also considered as multi-dimensional array. If I am having collection of one-dimensional array, then together I am going to call that as a multi-dimensional array. So it can comprises of n number of dimensions. Okay, more than 2 dimensions, everything will be considered as what? Multi-dimensional array. So one-dimensional array of one-dimensional array is called two-dimensional array. Right? So one-dimensional array will going to be considered as what? Two-dimensional array. Okay, and two-dimensional array to two-dimensional array, that is what it is, just multiplying. So it is getting complex. So we are going to consider this kind of array as what? Multi-dimensional array. More than one kind of dimensions, more than 2 kinds of dimensions will be there in order to store the similar set of data elements. So this kind of array will going to be termed as what? Multi-dimensional array. So in the today's session, we have learned regarding the definition of an array and what is the use of having array. So mainly I have to group something. I have to combine all the data element which belongs to the same data type. That is what the main intention of a having array. Okay, and for all the elements which we are giving or which we are storing or which we are combining under the same name. No need to give different name for different elements. Instead of that, I am going to call that as what? We are going to call in a single name. So that is nothing but name of an array. Then how can I get to know the location of each elements in an array? That is with the help of indices or a subscript. And that subscript value starts with 0 up to n minus 1. And we have types of array: one-dimensional, two-dimensional and multi-dimensional. Okay. So in brief, I have discussed regarding the definition of each dimension. So in the next session, we are going to learn completely regarding this one-dimensional array. So what do you mean by one-dimensional array? What is the definition? And how we are going to use the elements? How it will be the declaration? How can I access the elements of an one-dimensional array? In the programming, how we are going to give the one-dimensional array and how it will be printed. Everything about the one-dimensional array that I will be discussing in my coming session. So that I hope you all understood with my today's session. Let me meet you in the next session with the one-dimensional array. Until that, keep learning, keep on growing. Thank you.